Iran is building up its military capabilities for a possible resumption of war. Reports suggest that Russia is quietly helping Iran rebuild its drone and missile capabilities, and this as US and Iran are exchanging notes to end the war. Our next report tracks the emerging Russia-Iran defense axis. Take a look.
Iran is rearming itself under the shadow of a fragile ceasefire, and its ally Russia is emerging as major player. Moscow is reportedly reviving Iran's military capabilities. As relentless bombing is paused, Iran is recovering missile systems, drone launchers, and other equipment hidden underground or buried under the debris. U.S. officials believe these systems could be used against American forces and regional allies if the conflict resumes. Iran's military spokesperson has already issued a warning to Washington. Brigadier General Mohammad Akraminia said, Iran will deploy surprising new methods of warfare if attacked again.
If the enemy once again becomes afflicted with a miscalculation and resorts to aggression against our country, they will certainly face other surprising options. These options, in addition to being the determination and will of our colleagues and comrades in the armed forces, will be more advanced equipment and renewed and new methods of war, and perhaps most importantly of all, new arenas of war. Meaning that the war will enter an arena that the enemy did not predict.
Reports also suggest that Moscow is also sending thousands of fiber optic drones to Iran, along with longer-range satellite-guided drones equipped with Starlink terminals. While there is no confirmation, but the reports underscore growing military cooperation between Russia and Iran. Unlike conventional drones, fiber optic systems are connected to operators through physical cables rather than radio signals. This makes them highly resistant to electronic jamming. These drones have become increasingly important in Russia's war in Ukraine, where both sides have engaged in intense electronic warfare. A New York Times report says that Russia is sending drone components to Iran through the Caspian Sea, evading the U.S. blockade around the Strait of Hormuz. Caspian Sea directly connects Iran's northern flank with Russia. It has been a key trade route between both countries and an important component of north-south transport corridor, which connects Indian Ocean and Persian Gulf to the Caspian Sea via Iran. Russia is also ready to step in on nuclear front. Vladimir Putin has offered to take Iran's enriched uranium and dilute it under the supervision of International Atomic Energy Agency. Russia has previously played the same role after US and Iran agreed on Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2015 under Obama administration. Iran shipped over 11,000 kg of low-enriched uranium to Russia. US officials have argued that both Russia and China provided Iran with satellite imagery of US and allied bases during the war. Both Beijing and Moscow have denied these claims.
All right, and to discuss more, joining us live from Washington, D.C. is Colonel David B. DeRoche. He's a professor at the Air Marshal Institute and former Deputy Director for Peacekeeping in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Colonel Roche, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Now, I'm curious to know how you are reading into these latest reports that Russia may have supplied Iran with nearly 5,000 short-range fiber optic drones, and these are the very systems that Moscow has battle-tested in Ukraine, along with the longer-range satellite-guided drones here.
Yeah, so the fiber optic drones aren't much concern. I think that that's over-exaggerated. Those are mostly of tactical use on land warfare, so things like tanks fighting tanks, but the challenge that the United States has here, or most of our operations are going at a much greater distance with ships. Usually, if you use a fiber optic drone over sea, the cable is easier to see and it can be interdicted. And in any event, the protection that ships have warships, not the civilian ships that Iran's been firing at, are great enough to deal with these. So that's not much of a concern. What would be of concern would be, first off, satellite guided drones, which do have a longer range, have an ability to attack civilian infrastructure in the GCC states and possibly U.S. warships in the Arabian Sea. But what your report didn't mention is if Russia is providing assistance in the reconstitution of Iranian air defenses, that would be a significant factor, because that would inhibit the U.S. and Israel's ability to drop bombs, cheap, low-cost bombs over Iran, which is kind of what we had before the war started and what we saw a few days ago after the Iranian attacks on the USS Truxtun and Mason when they transited the Strait of Hormuz.
Right. Noted, Colonel, and reports suggest that Iran lost nearly 60% of its drone arsenal during the recent conflict. But if Russian shipments continue at this pace, how quickly do you think Tehran could rebuild that capacity? And inside the Pentagon, how does that fundamentally alter the threat calculus for, the American troops and the allies stationed across the Gulf?
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for what's going on inside the Pentagon now. I left. But it's a consideration. I mean, what it implies is that there may be mass drone attacks against civilian infrastructure in the GCC states, and that's always a consideration. So obviously, a major focus of the U.S.-Israeli effort has been to destroy Iran's ballistic missile and drone attack capability. But if Iran is able to reconstitute that quickly, then they have a possibility of, particularly given that they've been targeted at, not at defended military sites, but rather predominantly at undefended civilian sites. So they have the potential to do significant damage. And I think that if there is an indication that the shipments are being translated into offensive capability, it's probably another factor that will lead to the resumption of conflict.
Right, and what's particularly striking is also the report that Vladimir Putin has personally offered to train Iranian operators to use these systems against U.S. forces in the region. And this at the same time while he's offering to take Iran's enriched uranium to help de-escalate tensions. Now, how do you think Washington is going to react to this coordinated security partnership between Russia and Iran?
Yeah, so the second part, the offer to house enriched uranium, I think will be viewed as welcome but unnecessary. It would be viewed as Russia trying to interject itself in a problem, but in a way that actually is probably politically unacceptable to the U.S., but it is helpful in de-escalating nuclear things. The provision of drones, on the other hand, will be seen as malign, harmful, and something to be countered. I'm not sure, given that Russia seems to be consumed in the war in Ukraine. I mean, they in the victory parade, they had North Korean troops marching. Just a few years ago, they denied that they were taking part in any combat operation. So the fact that they have been unable to conclude a war that I thought would be over in 3 weeks indicates to me that Russia doesn't really have that much expertise or capacity that they can export to Iran. They're consumed with their own war. So I think that will probably not be viewed as, it'll be viewed as a sign of bad faith, but it won't be viewed as a legitimate military capacity.
Right, but another fascinating layer to this story is, of course, the energy politics. The Hormuz crisis and the instability in the Gulf, they have handed Russia both economic windfalls and also strategic leverage through higher oil prices. And having said that, do you think that Moscow is truly standing by an ally here, or is the Kremlin perhaps fishing in troubled waters?
The latter. I mean, Iran and Moscow are not allies. There is a great disregard. I mean, a lot of people forget, but in that 2-year period when the United States had an absolute nuclear monopoly, where we could basically tell any country in the world, this is what we want to do, the only time we actually exercised it was telling the Soviet Union. You recall that the Anglo-Americans occupied southern Iran and the Russians occupied the north part of Iran. At the end of the war, the Soviet Union did not want to leave Iran. And the only time we actually said, we are a nuclear power, you are not, you will do this, was to get the Soviets to evacuate Iran. And there is still a little bit of a resentment there, more than a little bit, over Iran's failed colonial attempts, or rather the Soviet Union's failed colonial attempts in Iran. So it's a marriage of convenience. You'll recall that a few years ago, Russia tried to base forces in Iran, and that was rejected.
Right. Of course, this is a developing situation, Colonel Roche, but of course we'll have to wait and see where it goes from here. But for now, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your insights with us.
It's an honor. Thank you.